Chapter 1. March into the Kingdom of Sand. Subtitle: The Parkers Enter Ancient Egypt. The world had changed around them for thousands of years, but the Parkers remained the same, 25 years old, hardened by eras and carrying the weight of history behind their eyes. They had survived the end of the Ice Age. They had survived the rise of early humans. They had survived the birth of cities and the fall of kingdoms. They had walked through deserts, forests, river valleys, and empires. Now they crossed the dunes of the Bronze Age world on camelback, moving toward a land shaped by gods, kings, and sand. Mary Parker rode at the front, her posture steady, her face wrapped in linen to shield her from the sun. Prince, her husband, rode beside her, quiet, alert, scanning the horizon. Their 3 children followed close behind, Amin on the right flank, Princess in the center, Rashim riding silently with his eyes fixed ahead. Behind them rode the grandchildren, each one also frozen at 25, each one shaped by centuries of survival. Cassandra Brown, Amira Campbell, Amir Chambers, Nasir Parker, Nishim Parker, Naimir Parker, Shaheen Parker. They moved as a unit, practiced and disciplined. The heat shimmered across the dunes. The camels grunted under the weight of water skins and supplies. The wind carried the distant sound of voices, drums, chanting, movement. Mary raised a hand. The caravan slowed. They crested the next dune, and the world opened. A vast river cut through the desert like a living vein. Palm trees lined its banks. Boats drifted across the water. Farmers worked the fields. Markets bustled with color and noise. Towering pylons painted with falcons and lotus flowers rose above the city. Ancient Egypt. Alive, powerful, thriving. Princess exhaled. We finally reached it. Prince nodded once. New Kingdom era. Look at the architecture. Amin studied the skyline. We're close to the capital. Mary didn't speak. She simply stared at the city, its gold, its stone, its impossible beauty. After everything they had survived, this felt like stepping into a legend. They guided their camels down the dune, entering the outskirts of the city. Traders shouted. Children ran past them. Priests carried incense. No one questioned the strangers wrapped in desert cloth. Not yet. A rumble shook the ground. The crowd parted. A royal procession approached. Soldiers in bronze armor, chariots gleaming, banners snapping in the wind. Priests chanted beneath a canopy of gold. At the center sat a young boy wearing the blue crown of Egypt, Tutankhamun. The boy king's eyes swept the crowd. Then they stopped, on Mary. For a moment, the noise of the city faded. The heat, the wind, the drums, everything fell away. Amir Chambers leaned forward slightly. "Grandma, he's staring right at you." Prince narrowed his eyes. He sees something. Amin's voice was low. He recognizes something in her, even if he doesn't know what. Tutankhamun's expression shifted. Curiosity, recognition, something deeper. Then the procession moved on, swallowed by the noise of the city. Mary exhaled slowly. We stay quiet. We stay grounded. We don't interfere unless we have no choice. But deep inside, she felt it. They hadn't just wandered into Egypt. They had arrived exactly where history needed them. And the sands of the kingdom were already shifting. Part 1. The Shadows of Thebes. The glare of the midday sun bounced off the white limestone walls of the grand capital. The Parker family settled into a spacious, courtyard-centered mud brick villa rented in the city's bustling residential sector. Here, among weavers and pottery merchants, they were just another wealthy merchant family from the eastern lands. Inside the safety of the high walls, the heavy travel linens were set aside. Mary sat by a small basin of cool water, her expression thoughtful. Prince stood near the doorway, watching the street through a latticed screen. "The boy king is fragile," Prince observed quietly, turning back to the family. "The political currents here are deeper than the Nile itself. The court is managed by older men, advisors who remember the old ways, generals who want conquest. A child on the throne is a target." "We saw the advisors in the procession," Princess said, leaning against a pillar while polishing a piece of travel gear. "The one walking closest to the royal chariot. He had eyes like a desert hawk. He didn't like the way King Tut looked at Mom." "That would be Vizier I," Amin stated, sitting cross-legged as he sharpened a small bronze utility knife. "And behind him, Horemheb, the commander of the army. They hold the real reins of Egypt right now. If the young pharaoh shows any sign of independent thought or curiosity about outsiders like us, it disrupts their balance." Cassandra Brown walked over to her father, sitting beside him on the woven mat. "Dad, when King Tut looked at Grandmom, it wasn't just curiosity. It looked like he was desperate for someone he could trust. The whole city feels like a beautifully painted trap. Amin placed a reassuring hand on his daughter's shoulder. It is a trap, Cassandra. Royal courts always are. That's why we keep our distance. We observe the historical timeline. We ensure the stability of the era, and we move on. But Uncle Amin, what if the timeline is being pushed off course? Amir Chambers asked, stepping into the courtyard alongside his sister, Amira Campbell. While we were in the market, we heard the temple guards whispering. They weren't talking about blessings or trade. They were talking about a hidden tomb, an ancient lineage, and an artifact meant to solidify Ai's control over the throne permanently. Amira nodded, her expression serious. They mentioned a secret ceremony tonight in the Valley of the Kings. They're planning to use the young king's vulnerability to force a decree. If Ai gets total authority, the boy won't survive to adulthood. Rasheem Parker, who had been sitting silently in the corner of the courtyard adjusting a set of light leather bracers, looked up. His 4 sons, Nisir, Nishim, Nimir, and Shahim, stood behind him like an immovable wall of protective muscle. "We cannot let an innocent kid be disposed of by ambitious politicians," Rasheem said, his voice carrying a deep, steady resonance. "But we also cannot march into the Valley of the Kings as an army. We'd spark a civil war before sundown." "Your brother is right," Mary said, rising from the basin and looking at her children and grandchildren. "The general audience of this city, the families, the mothers, the everyday people working the fields, they deserve peace, not bloodshed. We must act with absolute precision. If we must intervene, we do it from the dark. No one sees us. No one knows the Parkers were ever there." Prince walked to a heavy wooden chest in the back of the room. He lifted the lid, revealing folds of specialized, light-absorbing black cloth. The fabric was dense, designed to swallow reflection completely, covering the body from head to toe, leaving only the eyes exposed. "The Black Bullet's stealth gear. Night falls quickly in the desert," Prince said, his eyes scanning the family tree gathered around him. "We divide and conquer. Rasheem, take your boys and secure the perimeter of the valley. Princess, you and your children keep watch on the palace entries. Amin, Cassandra, you're with Mary and me. We enter the tomb itself." "Understood, Grandpa," Nisir Parker said, nodding toward his brothers. Nishim, Nimir, and Shahim immediately stepped forward to gather their gear, their movements perfectly synchronized after centuries of shared survival. "Let's move," Amin said, looking at Cassandra. "Dress in secrecy. The shadows are our territory tonight." Part 2. The Valley of Whispers. Under a moonless Egyptian sky, the limestone cliffs of the Valley of the Kings looked like jagged black teeth tearing into the stars. The heat of the day had evaporated, replaced by a biting desert chill that swept through the rocky ravines. To any casual observer, the valley was empty, guarded only by a few sleepy temple watchmen holding flickering torches. But in the deep fissures of the rock, completely invisible to the guards, the Parker family moved like living ink. Clad in their pitch-black stealth outfits, their faces completely covered except for their sharp, observant eyes, they glided along the cliff faces. On a high ridge overlooking the entrance to the newly carved royal tomb, Rasheem Parker crouched, his black form melting perfectly into the stone. Behind him, his 4 sons kept watch on the valley floor. "Movement at 2 o'clock, Dad," Nishim whispered, his voice barely a breath against the wind. Rasheem looked down. A small, heavily guarded convoy was entering the valley through a secret path. At the front walked Vizier Ai, his ceremonial robes hidden under a dark cloak, but his distinctive gold signet ring catching the faint starlight. Behind him, 2 hulking guards practically dragged the young King Tutankhamun. The boy king was bound at the wrists, a cloth lightly draped over his mouth to prevent shouting. "They're bypassing the main guards," Nimir noted, his muscles tensing. Uncle Amin was right. This is an illegal coup under the guise of a ritual. "We stay in position," Rasheem instructed his sons calmly. "Let Aunt Princess know they're inside the perimeter. Nisir, Shahim, secure the secondary escape route. If those guards try to run with the king, you block them down without making a sound." "On it, Dad," Shahim whispered, and the 2 brothers vanished into the darkness like smoke. Meanwhile, near the base of the tomb entrance, Princess Parker and her children, Amir and Amira, occupied the shadows beneath a massive stone pylon. They watched as Ai signaled the tomb guards, who turned away as if they had seen nothing. Corruption had clearly reached the highest levels of the guard. "They've entered the outer corridor," Amira whispered to her mother. "Mom, should we move in?" "Not yet, sweetheart," Princess replied, her eyes tracking the closing heavy wooden doors of the tomb. "Your Uncle Amin and Grandmom are already inside. They took the ventilation shafts from the upper ridge." Our job is to make sure no reinforcements follow I down." Amir Chambers adjusted his grip on a non-lethal braided leather bolo rope. "Nobody gets past us, Mom. For a kid king, he's got a lot of courage. We're not letting I take his future." Deep within the subterranean labyrinth of the tomb, the air was heavy with the scent of dried cedar, natron, and fresh paint. The walls were covered in brilliant, intricate hieroglyphics depicting the journey of the sun god Ra through the underworld. Under the dim, flickering glow of oil lamps carried by I's personal henchmen, the shadows danced wildly across the painted faces of the gods. Mary and Prince moved through the upper rafters of the unfinished burial chamber, their black stealth gear rendering them entirely invisible against the unlit ceiling beams. Just below them, Amin and Cassandra dropped silently onto a ledge overlooking the central sarcophagus hall. Vizier I stood before a massive stone altar, upon which rested a heavy golden casket containing ancient records of dynastic lineage. The young king was forced onto his knees before the altar. "Sign the decree, Pharaoh," I hissed, his voice echoing off the stone walls. He held out a papyrus document that would officially transfer all administrative and military command to his office, rendering Tutankhamun a mere puppet figure. "The gods demand stability. You are a child, weak and sickly. Egypt needs a ruler who can command the armies of the north." Tutankhamun shook his head, his eyes burning with royal defiance despite his small stature. He spoke through the loosened cloth around his face. "I am the son of Akhenaten. The crown remains whole. I will not give Egypt to a thief." I's face contorted with rage. He gestured to his largest guard, a brute of a man holding a heavy bronze ceremonial mace. "Force his hand. If the king suffers an accidental fall in the dark of the valley, the gods will understand." The guard raised the heavy mace, stepping toward the bound boy. "Not on our watch," Amin whispered to Cassandra. Part 3. The Indiana Jones extravaganza. Before the guard could bring the mace down, a sudden concussive crack echoed through the chamber. Cassandra Brown had launched a perfectly aimed stone from her pocket sling, shattering the oil lamp directly above the guard's head. The room instantly plunged into semi-darkness, illuminated only by a single, dying torch on the floor. "What is this? Treason!" I screamed, stumbling back against the golden altar. From the absolute darkness, the Parkers struck. Amin dropped from the ledge like a falling panther, landing directly between the giant guard and the young pharaoh. With a fluid, sweeping motion, he caught the guard's wrist, twisting it outward with effortless leverage. The heavy bronze mace clattered to the stone floor. Amin delivered a quick, precise palm strike to the guard's chest, sending the massive man flying backward into a stack of wooden ceremonial shields, knocking him out instantly without spilling a drop of blood. "Who goes there?" I shouted, drawing a concealed bronze dagger, his eyes darting frantically around the pitch-black room. From the shadows behind the altar, Prince Parker materialized like a ghost, his black ninja-like suit completely obscuring his identity. Before I could even swing the dagger, Prince caught his arm, applied a gentle but unyielding pressure to a nerve cluster on the Vizier's wrist, and the dagger slipped from I's fingers. "The sands do not belong to you, Vizier," Prince said, his voice a low, gravelly baritone that seemed to vibrate through the very walls of the tomb. Cassandra rushed to the young king's side, her quick hands untying the rough ropes around his wrists. "Are you all right, Your Majesty?" she asked softly, her eyes kind and reassuring behind her black mask. Tutankhamun gasped, rubbing his wrists, staring up at the mysterious black-clad figures in absolute awe. You are the ones from the desert. The ones who walked with the dawn." "We are friends," Mary Parker said, stepping down from the upper platform, her black hood pulled low, her eyes steady and commanding. "But we must move. Now." Suddenly, the heavy stone doors at the chamber's entrance were thrown open. A dozen of I's elite temple guards rushed into the corridor, tipped off by the sound of the shattering lamp. They carried large bronze spears and torches, their faces set in grim determination. "We've got company!" Princess shouted from the corridor entrance, her voice echoing inward as she, Amir, and Amira fell back into the main chamber to maintain their defensive perimeter. "Rashim, close the exits!" Amin shouted into the dark. Outside, on the valley floor, Rashim and his sons sprang into action. Naisir and Shahim utilized their braided ropes to quickly snare the ankles of the external guards, tripping them into the soft sand before they could sound the alarm. Naishim and Naimir hoisted a massive, ancient wooden timber across the external tomb door handle, effectively barricading the secondary guard garrison inside their own quarters. Back inside the tomb, the situation was turning into a wild, cinematic scramble. The temple guards rushed forward, spears leveled. Amira, defensive wall, Princess commanded. The family moved with flawless, non-lethal precision, avoiding any triggering violence while ensuring absolute containment. Princess swerved past a spear thrust, using the guard's own momentum to slide him across the smooth limestone floor into a heavy stone sarcophagus lid. Amir used his bolo rope to spin around 2 guards, binding their legs together so they tripped over each other in a comical heap. Amira caught a dropped torch, swinging it in a wide, defensive arc to keep 3 more guards at bay while safely ushering the young king toward the rear exit. I, seeing his plan completely collapse, scrambled toward a hidden lever on the back wall of the tomb. "I cannot rule Egypt. None of you will leave this valley alive," he roared, slamming his fist against the concealed mechanism. A heavy, grinding sound groaned through the cliffs. "He's triggered the tomb trap," Prince warned. The ceiling beams began to crack. Huge, multi-ton limestone blocks designed to seal the tomb permanently against grave robbers began to slide down from the ceiling rafters. Sand began to pour rapidly through the ventilation shafts, threatening to bury everyone alive within minutes. "Dad, the main exit is blocking!" Cassandra shouted as a massive stone block crashed down, sealing the front hallway with a deafening boom. "The rear ventilation shaft," Amin called out, sweeping King Tut up into his arms to protect the boy from the falling debris. "Everyone, move! Follow Grandmom!" Mary Parker led the charge, her instincts honed by thousands of years of navigating collapsing worlds. She sprinted through the darkening, sand-filled corridor, dodging falling stones with supernatural grace. The family followed in perfect sequence, Princess shielding the younger ones, Prince anchoring the center, and Amin bringing up the rear with the pharaoh safely secured against his chest. The tomb was caving in rapidly. Sand was up to their knees, dragging at their steps like wet snow. "Uncle Amin, jump!" Amir shouted as a final, massive limestone slab began to drop over the last remaining exit gap. Amin executed a powerful, perfectly timed dive, sliding across the pouring sand with King Tut in his arms, clearing the collapsing doorway just as the multi-ton blocks slammed shut behind them, sealing Vizier I and his unconscious guards inside the outer, non-lethal containment chamber of the structure. They tumbled out onto the cool, starlit sands of the Valley of the Kings, breathless but entirely unharmed. Part 4. The Dawn of a True King. The dust from the sealed tomb slowly settled into the midnight air. On the valley floor, Rashim and his 4 sons met up with the rest of the family, ensuring the area was entirely clear of any remaining threats. Amin gently set the young king Tutankhamun down on a smooth stone ledge. The boy king looked around at the 13 black-clad figures surrounding him. Though their faces were covered, their eyes held a warmth and ancient wisdom that no mask could hide. With a coordinated motion, the Parker family pulled back their black hoods and face coverings, revealing their 25-year-old faces to the young pharaoh in the privacy of the desert night. Tutankhamun looked at Mary, his eyes wide with a profound sense of spiritual recognition. "You are the timeless ones. My father spoke of whispers in the oldest scrolls, of a family that watches over the turning of the world." Mary stepped forward, kneeling so she was at eye level with the young ruler. She reached out, gently placing her hand over his heart, mirroring the ancient contact ritual of recognition. "Your country is safe, young king. Vizier I will remain trapped until the temple authorities find him in the morning. His treachery is exposed, and his power is broken. But the true strength of Egypt does not come from decrees or gold." "Where does it come from?" the boy asked softly. "It comes from protecting the people," Princess said, stepping up beside her mother, her smile radiant in the starlight. "The families in the markets, the mothers in the fields, the children playing by the Nile. Rule for them, and your name will outlast the stone of these mountains." Tutankhamun stood up straight, his small shoulders squaring, the true weight of a pharaoh finally resting upon him, not as a burden, but as a noble purpose. "I will not forget this. I will rule with justice. I will protect the horizon." "We know you will, King Tut," Cassandra said with a cheerful nod, her father Amin smiling proudly beside her. "We must go before the dawn brings the city guards," Prince said, looking out toward the horizon where the first faint tint of purple was beginning to paint the Egyptian sky. "Our work here is done." The young king bowed deeply to the family, a gesture of absolute respect from the living god of Egypt to the timeless guardians of humanity. When he looked up, the space before him was empty. The Parkers had vanished back into the shadows of the canyons, as if they had never been more than a whisper carried by the desert wind. Epilogue: The Golden Legacy, In the centuries that followed, the name of Tutankhamun became synonymous with the golden splendor of ancient Egypt. His reign, though brief in the grand scale of history, was marked by a return to stability, peace, and the restoration of the traditional balance of the kingdom. The corrupt ambitions of viziers and generals were kept in check, guided by the unseen hand of a boy who had looked into the eyes of eternity and chosen to be a just ruler. When his grand tomb was finally sealed and forgotten beneath the shifting sands for thousands of years, the treasures inside spoke of gold, chariots, and magnificent artistry. But buried deep within the oldest oral traditions of the royal scribes, stories passed down through generations of temple families who lived along the Nile, there remained a curious, unwritten legend. It was the story of the 13 Watchers, a family that wore the darkness of the night, who appeared from nowhere to shield a young king from the wolves of his own court, and who vanished back into the sands once the balance of the kingdom was secured. Modern historians would find no inscriptions bearing the name of the Parker family within the Valley of the Kings. No golden masks were carved in their image, no papyrus scrolls recorded their lineages. But out in the deep desert, where the wind blows timelessly across the great dunes, the story remained alive. The Parkers moved forward into the vast, unfolding tapestry of the human journey. They rode their camels away from the glittering pylons of Thebes, crossing the distant ridges as the golden sun rose fully over the new kingdom. They had survived the ice, the beasts, and the birth of empires. And as they looked out toward the endless horizon of the future, they knew their journey was far from over. Wherever history hung in the balance, wherever the innocent needed a shield in the dark, the family would be there. The sands of time continued to drift, but the Parker family marched on, unbroken, unchanged, and forever watching over the destiny of the world. Chapter 2. The Horizon of the Ptolemies. Subtitle: The Shadows of Alexandria. The sands of Egypt had shifted for over 1,000 years since the Parkers had vanished into the canyons of the Valley of the Kings. Dynasties had collapsed, conquerors had marched across the delta, and the ancient bronze weapons of the new kingdom had given way to the gleaming iron and polished steel of the Mediterranean world. Yet the Parker family remained exactly the same, 25 years old, hardened by the long passage of eras and carrying the unyielding weight of human history behind their eyes. They had traveled through the rise of iron-wrought empires, watched the birth of philosophy, and walked the expanding trade routes that connected the east to the west. Now they crossed the stone-paved highways of a deeply divided Egypt on horseback, moving toward a magnificent metropolis shaped by Greek ambition, Roman muscle, and Egyptian mystique. Mary Parker rode at the front of the line, her posture steady and graceful, her eyes shielded by a fine linen veil as she looked out over the coast. Prince, her husband, rode right beside her, silent, hyper-alert, scanning the crowded roads for any sign of legionary scouts or royal spies. Their 3 children followed closely behind, Amin on the right flank, Princess keeping the center, and Rashim riding silently with his eyes fixed straight ahead. Behind them rode the 7 grandchildren, each one also frozen at 25, their instincts razor-sharp after centuries of survival. Cassandra Brown, Amira Campbell, Amir Chambers, Nisir Parker, Nishim Parker, Naimir Parker, Shaheem Parker. They moved as a flawless unit, disciplined and entirely synchronized. The cool Mediterranean breeze swept across the salt marshes, carrying the distinct scent of olives, sea wine, and burning cedar incense. In the distance, rising like a mountain of pure white stone against the blue sky, stood the Pharos lighthouse, the towering wonder of the world that marked the crown of Alexandria. Mary raised her hand, and the horses slowed to a gentle walk. They crested a stone ridge, and the magnificent capital opened before them. A vast harbor cut into the sea, filled with massive Roman quinqueremes and swift Greek merchant vessels. Paved marble avenues lined with towering Corinthian columns stretched through the royal quarter. Great libraries, bustling agoras, and sprawling temples dedicated to Serapis and Isis hummed with the chaotic energy of a world in transition. This was the Ptolemaic kingdom, beautiful, fragile, on the brink of a total imperial collapse. Princess exhaled softly, adjusting her travel cloak. A long way from the mud bricks of the old kingdom. The world has gotten so loud. Prince nodded once, his eyes tracking a patrol of armored Roman soldiers marching down the avenue. The Ptolemies have ruled for centuries, but Rome is knocking on the door. Look at the legionaries in the streets. Amin studied the royal palace overlooking the sea. The civil war between the young King Ptolemy and his sister has torn the court apart. We are entering a powder keg. Mary didn't speak immediately. She simply gazed at the brilliant city, its marble, its intellect, its dangerous political webs. After everything they had survived, from the frozen tundras to the tomb of Tutankhamun, this felt like the ultimate testing ground for the future of civilization. They guided their horses down the paved ridge, entering the outskirts of the royal harbor. Scholars carrying scrolls hurried past them, Macedonian guards shouted orders, and market women argued over the price of grain. No one questioned the traveling merchants wrapped in fine eastern silks. Not yet. A sudden trumpet blast echoed from the grand palace steps. The immense crowd parted in a wave of nervous whispers. A royal guard of Greek mercenaries marched forward, swords drawn, followed closely by a covered litter carried by 6 towering guards. The silken curtains of the litter were drawn back, revealing a young woman wearing a diadem of gold, her posture radiating an unmatched, brilliant authority. Queen Cleopatra VII. The queen's sharp, analytical eyes swept across the crowded square. Then they stopped, directly on Mary. For a brief second, the noise of the busy market faded away. The sea breeze, the tramping of the soldiers, the shouting of the traders, everything seemed to fall into a dead silence. Emir Chambers leaned forward slightly from his saddle, his voice a low whisper. "Grandma, she's locking eyes with you? She knows we aren't regular traders?" Prince narrowed his eyes, his hand resting casually near his mount's reins. "She is evaluating us. She reads people like a general reads a map." Amin's voice was barely audible. "She senses an ancient authority in Mom, a power that doesn't bow to Rome or Ptolemy." Cleopatra's expression shifted from calculated coldness to an intense, quiet curiosity. Then, with a subtle wave of her hand, the royal litter moved onward, swallowed up by the heavy gates of the palace. Mary exhaled slowly, her eyes remaining on the closed palace gates. "We keep our heads down, we find a secure base, and we ground ourselves. This era requires absolute subtlety." But deep inside, the entire family felt the familiar pull of destiny. They hadn't just traveled to Alexandria to witness history. They had arrived exactly when the scales of the world were about to tip. Part 1. The Web of Alexandria. The family settled into a fortified, 2-story stone villa located near the edge of the Rakotis district, the old Egyptian quarter of the city. Away from the prying eyes of the royal guard, they transformed the upper courtyard into a tactical staging ground. Mary sat near a carved stone table, reviewing a map of the royal palace layout that Amin had acquired from the harbor master. Prince stood by the balcony, his eyes watching the rooftops. "The queen is trapped in her own palace," Prince reported, turning back to the room. "Her brother Ptolemy's advisors have effectively isolated her. Roman general Julius Caesar has arrived in the city, occupying the royal guest quarters, but he is surrounded by thousands of hostile Egyptian troops. One wrong move, and the entire city goes up in flames. The advisors are the real threat," Princess said, tightening the buckles on her lightweight leather boots. "Pothinus, the royal eunuch, and Achilles, the head of the army. They're planning to assassinate the queen before she can form a true alliance with Caesar. They want a puppet king they can control." "We've seen this pattern before," Amin said, looking up from his inspection of a compact, brass-handled grappling hook. "Just like Vizier I in the Old Kingdom, ambitious men using chaos to steal a throne. But this time, the stakes involve the entire Mediterranean." Cassandra Brown walked over to her father, leaning over the map. "Dad, when we were near the Great Library earlier, I saw men marking the ventilation ducts and water cisterns beneath the royal quarters. They weren't maintaining them. They were preparing to cut off the palace's supply lines." Amin patted his daughter's hand. "Good eyes, Cassandra. They're planning a siege from within the city walls. They want to trap Caesar and Cleopatra together and eliminate them both." "Uncle Amin, it's worse than a simple siege," Amira Campbell said, stepping out onto the courtyard alongside her brother Emir Chambers. "We tracked a group of mercenary agents down by the docks. They're storing jars of highly flammable pitch and naphtha right next to the royal fleet. If those ships catch fire, the wind will blow the flames straight into the Great Library." Emir nodded, his expression grim. Thousands of years of human knowledge, medical scrolls, history, and science, all burned to ash just to win a political argument. "We can't let that happen, Uncle Amin." Rasheem Parker stood up from the stone bench where he had been quietly preparing. Behind him, his 4 sons, Nisir, Nishim, Nimir, and Shahim, stood ready, their physical presence commanding and solid. "The preservation of knowledge is why we watch over this world," Rasheem said, his deep voice filling the stone courtyard. "If the Great Library burns, humanity loses its memory. But we can't fight a legion or an army in the open. We have to dismantle this conspiracy from the dark." "Your brother is right," Mary said, rising from the table and looking at her family. The families of Alexandria, the scholars, the innocent people living in these crowded streets, they will be the ones who suffer if a full-scale riot breaks out. We must act with surgical precision. Tonight, we put on the dark cloth. No one sees us. No one knows the Parkers were ever here. Prince walked to the heavy iron-bound chest in the corner of the room. He lifted the lid, revealing the deep, light-absorbing folds of the black bullet stealth gear. The suits were pure, absolute black, designed to mask their movements entirely in the deepest shadows, leaving only their eyes visible to the night. "The moon is occluded by sea clouds tonight," Prince said, looking at the generations gathered around him. "Rashim, you and your boys secure the docks and neutralize the arsonists before they can ignite the pitch. Princess, you and your kids manage the library's perimeter defenses. Amin, Cassandra, you're with Mary and me. We penetrate the royal palace itself." "Understood, Grandpa," Nysir Parker said, nodding to his brothers. Nishim, Nymir, and Shahim immediately gathered their gear, moving with the quiet, practiced grace of a hunting pack. "Let's move," Amin said, pulling his black mask up over his face, leaving only his focused, protective eyes visible. "Dress in total secrecy. The shadows of Alexandria belong to us tonight." Part 2. The Siege in the Dark. Under a heavy, cloud-covered night sky, the magnificent marble palaces of Alexandria looked like cold white monuments rising out of the Black Sea. The harbor water lapped gently against the stone piers, but beneath the surface calm, the city was crawling with danger. In the shadows of the royal docks, a group of brutal mercenary arsonists moved stealthily between the moored Egyptian warships. They carried heavy clay jars filled with volatile pitch, ready to ignite the fleet on Achilles' command. From the top of a stone crane, Rashim Parker watched them, his black form completely indistinguishable from the iron machinery. Behind him, his 4 sons crouched in perfect silence. "They're prepping the torches, Dad," Nishim whispered, his voice a mere vibration in the air. Rashim tracked the lead arsonist. "We don't let a single spark touch those ships. Nisir, Shahim, take the western pier. Nymir, Nishim, take the eastern side. Neutralize them silently. No casualties, just total containment." "On it, Dad," Shahim whispered. The brothers dissolved into the darkness like ink spilling into water. A mercenary raised a flint to strike a spark, but before the metal could hit the stone, a black-clad arm reached out from the void behind him. Shahim applied a swift, precise pressure to the man's shoulder nerve, causing him to instantly go limp. Nysir caught the clay jar of pitch before it could smash against the wooden pier, setting it down without a sound. Within minutes, all 12 arsonists on the docks were neatly bound, gagged, and tucked away behind a stack of cargo crates, completely unconscious of what had hit them. Meanwhile, at the grand pavilion of the Great Library, Princess Parker and her children, Amir and Amira, occupied the shadows beneath a massive statue of Alexander the Great. They watched a rogue platoon of royal palace guards marching toward the side entrances of the repository of knowledge, carrying bundles of dry straw. "They want to make sure the fire spreads inside," Amira whispered, her muscles tensing beneath her black stealth suit. "Mom, we have to stop them before they reach the main doors." "Stay calm, Amira," Princess whispered back, her eyes locked on the moving platoon. "Amir, use the bolo ropes on the front line. Amira, create a distraction to split their formation. We keep them away from the steps." Amir Chambers spun his braided leather bolo rope with silent velocity. With a flick of his wrist, the rope zipped through the air, wrapping tightly around the ankles of the leading 2 guards. They tripped forward into the sand with a dull thud. Amira instantly dropped a specialized smoke pellet at the rear of the platoon, filling the corridor with a thick, odorless white mist that completely blinded the remaining soldiers. In the confusion, Princess moved like a whirlwind through the smoke, disarming the guards with swift, non-lethal sweeps and pressure strikes. The soldiers swung wildly at the empty air, hitting nothing but shadow, until the entire platoon was incapacitated, their torches extinguished in the dirt. Deep within the inner chambers of the royal palace, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The Roman general Julius Caesar stood near a massive bronze candelabra, his hand on the hilt of his gladius, while Queen Cleopatra paced the marble floor, her brilliant mind working through their limited options. "My brother's forces have surrounded the complex," Cleopatra said, her voice sharp and resolute despite the danger. "Pothinus has betrayed us. If we remain in this room, we will be cut down before the morning sun reaches the harbor." Caesar frowned, his veteran eyes scanning the heavy wooden doors of the chamber. "My legions are miles away, Queen. We have only a small personal guard. We cannot cut our way through thousands of Egyptian troops in the open streets." Suddenly, the torches in the main hallway outside were cut. The chamber doors groaned as a heavy iron battering ram began to smash against the wood. Pothinus's elite assassins had arrived to finish the coup. From the high, ornamental cornices of the palace ceiling, Mary and Prince Parker dropped down into the room like shadows separating from the night, their black bullet outfits rendering them entirely invisible until they chose to be seen. Caesar instantly drew his sword, stepping in front of Cleopatra. "Who goes there? More assassins?" Amin and Cassandra landed smoothly beside Mary, their faces covered, their eyes calm and steady. "We are not your enemies, General," Amin said, his voice a low, commanding baritone. "We are the ones who ensure history moves forward." Cleopatra stepped around Caesar, her sharp eyes locking onto Mary's exposed, ancient gaze. Recognition flashed through the queen's mind, the mysterious merchants from the market square. "The timeless ones," Cleopatra whispered. "You came back." "We never left, Queen," Mary said, her voice radiating an immovable calm. "The palace has fallen. We must evacuate you now." Part 3, The Cinematic Escape. The heavy wooden doors of the royal chamber shattered inward with a deafening crash. A dozen of Pothinus's elite assassins rushed into the room, their curved Greek swords gleaming in the faint light of the remaining candelabra. The lead assassin roared. The Parker family sprang into action with a dazzling, high-stakes display of non-lethal combat that felt like an epic adventure movie. Amin dropped low, sweeping his leg out to take down the first two attackers. As a third assassin lunged at Caesar, Amin intercepted the strike, catching the man's blade between two small bronze forearm guards hidden beneath his black sleeves. With a deft twist of his torso, Amin disarmed the assassin, sending the sword flying across the room into a heavy tapestry before delivering a quick palm strike that sent the man crashing into his own comrades. "Secure the queen," Prince commanded, stepping into the breach to block 3 more soldiers with a broken ceremonial staff he had snatched from a display rack. Cassandra rushed to Cleopatra's side, her movements fast and fluid. "Your Majesty, follow me. We're using the underground aqueduct paths." Caesar watched in absolute amazement as the black-clad figures dismantled the elite strike team without spilling a single drop of blood, using the assassin's own momentum against them. "By the gods," the Roman general muttered, joining the fray by knocking out a guard with the pommel of his sword. "These are no ordinary mercenaries." "Move! Now!" Princess shouted, appearing at the chamber door along with Amir and Amira having secured the upper hallway. "The secondary wave of guards is coming up from the courtyard." The family formed a protective circle around Cleopatra and Caesar, guiding them out of the collapsing royal quarters into a hidden service corridor. Outside, the city was in chaos. The sound of shouting and marching troops echoed from every avenue. Ai's ancient traps in the Old Kingdom had been dangerous, but the urban warfare of Alexandria was a living labyrinth. As they reached the lower palace courtyard, they found their exit blocked by a full company of Ptolemaic spearmen, their shields locked in a solid bronze wall. "We're boxed in," Amir noted, his hand on his bolo rope. "Not for long," Rashim's voice boomed from above. From the rooftops overlooking the courtyard, Rashim, Nisir, Nishim, Nimir, and Shahim launched a coordinated barrage of specialized grappling ropes and heavy linen canvas sheets. The massive fabrics dropped directly over the locked shields of the spearmen, completely blinding them and disrupting their formation. In that exact split second of total confusion, Amin and Prince led the charge through the gap. They dismantled the front line with non-lethal throws, flipping guards into the soft garden dirt, while Princess and her children safely escorted the 2 historical leaders through the opening. "To the fishing boats!" Amira called out, pointing toward a hidden slipway at the base of the palace cliff face where several small skiffs were moored. The royal guards tried to rally, but the grandchildren managed the choke point with absolute perfection. Nisir and Nishim hoisted a massive decorative marble basin, sliding it across the slick stone floor to block the main gate, while Nimir and Shahim used light-reflecting smoke pellets to create a wall of absolute shadow that kept the pursuing archers from gaining a clear line of sight. Amin swept Queen Cleopatra up into his arms to navigate a steep, rocky path leading down to the water, while Caesar leaped into the lead skiff alongside Prince. With a final, powerful push from Rashim and his sons, the small boats glided out into the dark, misty waters of the Alexandrian harbor, leaving the chaotic, shouting guards far behind on the burning shores. Part 4, The Crown of the Nile. The small fishing skiffs drifted quietly into a secluded rocky cove along the Pharos Island coastline, far away from the military patrols. The cool sea spray washed over the boats, settling the dust of the intense battle. On the shore of the quiet inlet, the Parker family gathered around the 2 greatest leaders of the Mediterranean world. The threat had been entirely neutralized. The Great Library was safe, the fleet was secure, and the coup had failed. With a unified, graceful movement, the 13 members of the family pulled back their black hoods and face coverings, revealing their young, unaging faces in the soft, early dawn light that was just beginning to touch the sea. Cleopatra looked at Mary, her brilliant, calculating eyes softening with an expression of profound historical reverence. The ancient scrolls of the Temple of Memphis did not lie. They speak of a family that walks between the ages, the silent guardians who preserve the balance when empires tremble. Mary stepped forward, her expression warm yet filled with an undeniable authority. She reached out, gently placing her hand over the young queen's shoulder, mirroring the timeless contact ritual of recognition they had performed for a boy king over 1,000 years prior. "Your kingdom is whole, Queen Cleopatra," Mary said softly, her voice carrying the depth of the centuries they had survived. "The assassins are contained, and the great library remains standing to preserve the mind of humanity. But remember this. True power does not lie in the might of Rome or the gold of the Ptolemies. Where does it rest?" Cleopatra asked, her voice steady and resolute. "It rests in the preservation of your people's future," Princess said, stepping up beside her mother with a bright, reassuring smile. "Protect the knowledge, shield the innocent families in the streets, and your legacy will outlast the marble of this city." Caesar stepped forward, bowing his head slightly to Prince and Amin, an unprecedented gesture of deep respect from the highest commander of Rome. "I have led legions across the known world, but I have never witnessed such discipline, such precision, or such honor. Rome owes you a debt it can never truly repay." "Keep the peace, General," Amin said with a calm nod, his daughter Cassandra smiling proudly by his side. "Ensure the world remains stable enough for the future to grow." "We will," Cleopatra promised, her shoulders squaring as she assumed the full, majestic mantle of her rule, no longer a fugitive queen, but the undisputed ruler of Egypt. The queen and the general turned for a moment to look out at the rising sun illuminating the white stone of the Pharos lighthouse. When they turned back, the rocky shore before them was completely empty. The Parker family had vanished back into the shadows of the coastal cliffs, leaving no footprints in the shifting sand, as if they had been nothing more than a magnificent legend carried away by the morning sea breeze. Epilogue: The Eternal Watchers. In the centuries that followed, the name of Cleopatra VII became immortalized as one of the most brilliant, powerful, and captivating rulers to ever command the ancient world. Her reign became a legendary chapter of intellect, political mastery, and cultural golden age. The great library she protected continued to light the path of human knowledge for generations, safeguarding the history of science, philosophy, and art for the world to come. When the great palaces of Alexandria eventually crumbled into the Mediterranean Sea over the course of millennia, buried beneath the waves and the passage of time, the treasures of her court spoke of gold, marble, and impossible beauty. But buried deep within the most secret, unwritten oral traditions of the Mediterranean scholars, stories told in whispers among the families who preserved the oldest knowledge, there remained a beautiful, persistent legend. It was the story of the 13 black-clad shadows, a tightly bonded family that wore the darkness of the night, who materialized from nothingness to protect a queen and a general from the wolves of their own era, and who vanished back into the stream of time once the balance of history was secured. Modern archaeologists would find no statues carved in the likeness of the Parker family within the sunken ruins of Alexandria. No Roman coins bore their names, no Greek inscriptions recorded their lineages, but out on the endless horizon, where the sea meets the sky, their true legacy lived on. The Parkers moved forward into the vast, unfolding tapestry of the human journey, leaving the ancient world behind as they rode into the uncharted territories of the future. They had survived the ice, the Bronze Age deserts, and the fall of the greatest pharaohs. And as they looked out toward the expanding world before them, they knew their ancient vigil was far from over. Wherever history hung in the balance, wherever the innocent needed a shield in the dark, the family would always be there. The empires of the earth would rise and fall like the tides of the sea, but the Parker family marched onward, unbroken, unchanged, and forever watching over the destiny of the world.